Welcome to the Football Garbage Time NFL podcast and our Scares and Dares episode as we discuss our favorite horror movie scares and the NFL player props that we dare to make. I'm husband Wong and I'm the editor-in-chief of Football Garbage Time. And with me, as always, for our Scares and Dares episode is your staff writer and my co-host, Joanne. How you doing, Joanne? All right, we got a doozy of an episode today as we discuss our favorite horror movie scares of 2024 and the NFL player prop sets for Super Bowl LIX that we dare to make. So, hey, let's get started with our horror movie scares, shall we? Okay, let's start with our horror movie scares of 2024. Suffice to say, each of these movies will get a coveted 4 out of 4 stars from us, since they are our favorite movies of the year. But each of us will also give you a scare-meter ranking of 0 to 10, 0 being My Little Pony, 10 being, oh my God, I'm totally hiding underneath the blanket. All right, let's start with you, Joanne. Give us your top movie of 2024 and count them down for us. I know there's 3 of them that we're going to give today, so give us your top 3.
So my first one is Oddity.
Okay.
I want to say I really like this movie. I don't know how scary it really is, but I like the premise of it. I like the setting of the movie. I just liked everything about it all around.
Yeah. And let's just say something about Oddity. So Oddity made my honorable mention. So they didn't make my top 3, but it made my honorable mention. And let's give them a little bit of background as to what Oddity is about. So just so everyone knows, Oddity starts with a particular character, Danny Odello Timmis, the wife of a psychiatrist, Tim Timmis, who was brutally murdered while renovating the couple's newly acquired country house. Olin Boole, one of Ted's former patients, visited Danny that evening, warning her of a stranger that infiltrated her home. Olin is believed to be the murderer, at least that's what they are telling us, but is later found by Declan Barrett murdered in his room, murdered in a halfway house. Now, 1 year later, Danny's twin sister, Darcy, a blind clairvoyant with psychometric powers, is visited by Ted at her Cabinet of Curiosities shop in Cork, Ireland. And several days later, Darcy arrives unexpectedly at the country house where Ted now resides with his new girlfriend, Yana, a pharmaceutical representative. Preceding Darcy's arrival is the shipment of a large crate mysteriously containing a large, strange, life-size wooden mannequin that is so freaky. And all these questions start coming up. Who killed Danny? Why? And what is the purpose of the strange mannequin that Darcy sent? So that's kind of the setup there for Oddity. And it got 96% from critics on Rotten Tomatoes. So I totally agree. Very, very scary wooden golem type story here.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would call that. The thing you call a mannequin,
Yeah.
I would call a golem.
Yeah, it's like a wooden golem, I
Yes.
guess. But it's kind of like it's off camera a lot, but there's certainly some like stalking going on.
Yeah, it's always in the shadow. It's just sitting in the background. You think you see it moving. You're not sure because, as everybody knows, like mannequins should not move.
Yes, absolutely not.
So
That's a bad thing.
right. So you see Darcy, she's like in this, in there to kind of investigate what happened to her twin sister.
Right.
And she doesn't let on that she knows anything. She doesn't say that she blames her brother-in-law.
Right.
She just, comes as a guest. And of course, he can't say no.
Yeah. And it's actually very interesting because he has work to do. So he leaves almost immediately, leaving his girlfriend.
I think it was his fiance.
Or fiance. Perhaps it was fiance.
Yeah,
okay.
they were going to get married.
It leaves her there with her alone.
Yeah.
Which
He's
is
like, I'm not dealing with
yeah,
it.
that's freaky. I mean, first of all, the wooden golem is freaky enough, but now you got to stay with the sister-in-law of his ex-wife who was murdered. Murdered. No, thank you. No, thank you very much. Okay, that's appearing on Shudder right now. So what do you think here in terms of scare meter? What do you give it from 0 to 10?
I really think this was all that scary. I'm gonna give it a 6.
A 6. I give it a 7. I actually think it was pretty scary. There was a lot of things that are off scene, and they do a great job of positioning that wooden golem in weird ways
And also
that
the
are really
scenery,
freaky.
because it's a very old house that they renovated.
Right.
It's in the middle of nowhere.
Absolutely
all
nowhere.
stone.
Yep.
Like the movie is pretty much in a very dark setting. So it creates this very mysterious ambiance.
I totally agree with that.
If you're thinking of like jump scares and gore type of horror, that's not this kind of movie.
No, it's definitely it's actually supernatural.
Yes,
horror,
supernatural.
and certainly that's a big part of it. So yeah, I totally agree. I think it's a really, really good one there. And yeah, I mean, let's roll on. What's your number 2? So that's your number 1 of the year.
Yeah, and the way I'm kind of putting these in order, I want to say is a combination of how much I like the movie, and because we've seen so many horror movies, how well I remember them.
Right.
Because if I remember them pretty well, I feel like I enjoyed it.
Yes. It's worth it. It's
yes.
definitely impactful. It's impacted you in some way.
So it's horror in a sense, but I don't know. It's not all scary.
Well, yeah, of course. It just has to be something you remember. So let's go to your number 2. So that was number 1. What's your number 2?
So my number 2 was Apartment 7A.
Right. So the prequel, if you will, to Rosemary's Baby.
Yes. So this one is a very interesting one, I think, because we all kind of know the story of Rosemary's Baby.
Right.
But, you never really think like, how long has this been going on?
Yeah.
How long has this building been there? How long has the people who reside in the building have been trying to get this, demon
baby
born? How? We don't know how long has this been.
No, it's true. We don't. And we don't know what the premise of, because a lot of things happen at the beginning of Rosemary's Baby that are unexplained, right? The woman who jumps out of the building.
Because it starts that way.
Right.
It starts with a couple that is going into the building and
take over the empty apartment.
Right. And they see that there is this, accident and police presence by the building, and you're like, well, what's going on?
Sure. Yeah.
So I like this movie a lot because I know what Rosemary's Baby is about,
right?
And I liked how they connected this prequel to the original movie, and they did a very good job of it.
I mean, they directly connected it up.
Right.
Like the very end of the movie picks up exactly where Rosemary's Baby takes off in the beginning,
and just to solidify that they did a good connection and transition, we did watch Rosemary's Baby after we saw the
yeah. And there are several things that don't quite match up, but for the most part, I'd say 90% of it matches up.
Right, because it's hard. Like, how do you match up something in 2024? It
was obviously not contemplated when they made Rosemary's Baby.
Right, when they made it way back when, in the 70s, I believe. Right?
It was a long time ago. That's all I can tell you.
I believe it might have been the 70s from the way they were dressed.
Okay.
But they did I thought a really good job in connecting the two stories. And I really liked the main character in Apartment 7A, Terry.
Yeah.
So I guess if you've never seen the movie Apartment 7A, it follows a Broadway, singer dancer who's looking for fame and fortune.
Right.
She gets her big break, but during rehearsal, while when she's jumping off, she actually lands on her ankle.
Yeah.
And breaks it.
Yeah.
It totally ruins.
That's one of the most horrifying part of the movie. Actually, seeing that, I'm like, oh my gosh, don't close in on that. I don't need to see that.
But it totally ruins her career because she's a dancer.
Right, of course.
And now nobody believes that she could actually handle any roles, because what do you do if you're a dancer and your ankle is not stable enough to perform? Like it's devastating.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
She falls on hard times. She can't get work. She doesn't want to mooch off her friend anymore. So she finds, of course, the Bramford, where the Rosemary's Baby takes place. It's an apartment building that is filled with devil worshippers, but we don't know that. She doesn't know that.
Yep.
She just finds the kindness of a wealthy couple who offers her an apartment.
Right.
And
Kindness in quotes.
and all these things go awry. And it's really a question of how much are you really willing to do for fame and fortune, or for whatever you want?
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Like what to what lengths?
And I think that's kind of the story behind the entire series, really. But Julia Gardner plays the main role there. I think she does a fantastic job. She actually was from the Netflix crime drama series Ozark from 2017 to 2022, won 3 Primetime Emmy Awards. So this definitely a big step up for her here in this movie. So good job here for Julia Gardner. And I think also a really good movie. Just so everyone knows, only 48% on the Rotten Tomato meter, but it has an audience score of over 60%. So obviously an enjoyable movie nonetheless. Give us a scare-o-meter from 0 to 10.
Again, I don't think this movie was that scary. I mean, the premise of, trying to give birth to the devil and bringing him
We've seen it. We know what's going to happen.
I mean, again, not much gore in this movie. I give it a 4.
Yeah, I give it a 5. Obviously, I think you go slightly scarier than you is where we're at right now. So there you go. Apartment 7A, your number 2 movie of 2024. Give us your number 3.
So my third pick was actually a little difficult. I had a lot of time contemplating what I wanted to include in 3 out of like 1,000 movies we saw
a lot
in 2024.
Very true.
But I actually landed on stop motion.
Stop motion. Okay. Yeah, yes. Really good one. Yeah, of course.
On stop motion. And I picked stop motion because I was like really thinking about the movies that we watched. And this one is very different than I feel like the traditional other movies that we watched. Yes. And the premise also very new. It's very novel.
I agree.
And I liked the development of the characters.
Yes.
Like her slow spiral into madness.
Yep.
The audience were kind of left what's real, what's not real, what is really in her mind, what's really happening.
Right.
Because like in a lot of horror movies, they show you things and you don't know if it's actually really happening.
Right.
Because as you know, they show you a very gory scene and then in the next one, everything's perfectly fine.
Right. And of course, the premise of the movie being that the daughter of a really well-known stop motion animator takes over for her when she passes away and is just as obsessed over making a good stop motion film as her mother was, even though she detested her mother for it in the past, and starts to become consumed by this grotesque world of horrifying creations, and things really then tend to start to spiral out of control for her.
But she actually has something to prove because she's been living in her mother's shadow this entire time.
Right.
She's only listened and followed orders that her mother has given her. Now, after her mother dies, she wants to finish this project, but not just finish her mother's vision, but she wants to finish her vision in this project, which she thought, she always had ideas for, but her mother just never listened to her.
This is very true.
And so it does become like this very strange world where fiction and reality kind of merge together.
And it's unclear where the intersection is.
Which is which. And I thought like they did a really good job in not only just the stop motion animation that's used in the movie, but also in kind of combining like the reality and the fiction of the two worlds.
Absolutely. I think they did a fantastic job. It was very, very creepy. Very creepy.
Agree.
And stop motion is kind of creepy to begin with. So this made it extra creepy, I think. And this one is playing on both Hulu and on Shudder, by the way. And I guess we should have mentioned that Apartment 7A on Paramount Plus, if you want to watch that. So this one got a 91% on the tomato meter. So very well liked by critics here. Let's give us your scare-o-meter here from 0 to 10.
I think this one probably is a 7.
7? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can agree with that because it was particularly creepy, I think. I think that it's a little bit unclear because it seems to be a little bit of a descent into madness. What's real, what's not real. And it makes it for a very uncomfortable viewing. Like you're not quite sure where your footing is throughout the entire movie. And you're not quite sure where she is and who is real and not real throughout the entire movie as well. So certainly really, really tricky stuff there.
And this movie also contains some gore and some blood, and I think
it's almost like body horror, though, right? I mean, it's almost like a Cronenbergian body horror.
Yeah, but also like people get killed in this movie as well.
They do.
So,
They certainly do.
so there's more of that than I think than in Oddity and Apartment 7A.
Right.
And I think just for me, I think the stop time animation and kind of like the blood and like I guess like gore that's in this movie makes it, I think, for general viewers probably scarier than
it's
Oddity
certainly
and Apartment 7A.
because it's nothing really fantastical. It's just that she's doing something that is a little creepy, and then you just start losing track of reality and unclear where the line is drawn there. So that's your 1, 2, and 3 of this year. Number 1, Oddity. Number 2, Apartment 7A, and number 3, stop motion. Great picks there. So let me go through my number 1, 2, and 3. Number 1, I have Late Night with the Devil, which I will say got 97% from Rotten Tomatoes. This film is very interesting to me. I have not seen anything very similar to this. It's almost found footage, but not really. It's almost documentary, but not really. I think it's really interesting how they do it because they frame it as a documentary on an unexplained event that theoretically occurred on the night of Halloween 1977 during the live broadcast of an episode of a successful variety late night talk show called Night Owls with Jack Delroy, which competed theoretically with the Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. And after Jack's wife, Madeline, dies of cancer, Night Owls halts its production, but after some time off, Jack returns and in order to boost the show's low ratings, does a special occult-themed episode on Halloween, bringing on the show a 13-year-old Lily Diabo, who is purportedly possessed by a demonic spirit. And as you can imagine, things go horribly wrong from then, revealing some of Jack's disturbing secrets on live TV. And it plays out as if it's the episode itself, plus some background footage that was shot, that was put together in a documentary type style. So I thought really, really unique, very fun way of really of playing with it, and incredibly authentic. And I wasn't watching late night television in 1977, but it seemed totally authentic for the 1970s here.
And I gotta say, like, I actually have that one as my honorable mention.
Oh, your honorable mention. Okay, great. Yeah.
Because I liked that movie. I really liked how they filmed it.
Yeah.
I liked the kind of the yellowness of the film and how they just made it, to look.
It's like kind of grainy.
Yeah.
It's really well done.
And and I have to say, it's also the premise is not new.
No.
Like, there's a lot of stories where we like sell our souls to get fame.
People do it all the time.
Or succeed.
But that being said, they really kind of unreal the story slowly, right?
But the thing about this movie is just really how they presented that story. And I think the way they presented the story was done so well.
Right. I agree.
And it's a very good story that they shot extremely well. I don't know, just everything about it. It was very enjoyable.
Yeah, and David Dastmalchian, who plays Jack Delroy, is amazing. He does a fantastic job. Yeah. He definitely seems like a late night show host. Yes. And when things start going awry, he just he tries to roll with it, and it's actually really fascinating. A little side note, obviously, Ian Bliss plays a magician turned skeptic, Carmichael Haig. That character actually apparently is modeled after the real magician turned skeptic James Randi, who was involved with a similar altercation in an Australian late night TV show with Don Lane and the Don Lane Show. So there was some inspiration there for some of the things that happened, but obviously not everything, because not everything in this movie happened in real life. If it did, it would be absolutely frightening. So Scarometer here on 0 to 10, I will give it a 6 on the Scarometer. I thought it was done very well, and of course, in terms of being found footage, and it just feels like, oh my gosh, this could have really happened. So it feels very realistic, very authentic. What about you?
I want to give it a 5.
Okay.
It's interesting because you know how there's a lot of skeptics when you see like a possession.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's kind of, when you're watching it, it does feel like, oh, can this be staged?
Yeah. Right. Of course.
The horror part of it is there, but like I don't know how scary it really was to me.
Yeah, I think it is scary to think that it could happen. It looks so authentic that it could have happened in real life. I think that's part of the scare. and of course the slow reveal as to what's going on, because there's obviously a lot of issues that happen along the way. There's a little bit of body horror that goes along, some gore. It certainly is mass craziness in the third act. So certainly a fun movie there, and that's my number 1 of the year. My number 2 of the year is Smile 2, the sequel to Smile. The critics also love this at 85%. Incredible performance here by Naomi Scott. Really, really well done. So the premise here, of course, is that picking up exactly where Smile 1 ended, 6 days after Rose Cotter's death, the now cursed Joel, who you might recall is the police officer who got the Smile curse by witnessing Rose's death at the end of the first movie, attempts to pass the Smile entity, we'll call it, by killing one murderous criminal in front of another. But during the shootout, he accidentally kills the witness. But the drug dealer, Louis Fergoli, who happens to be there and he didn't realize was there, inherits the curse as a bystander. So when Joel flees, he's run over and killed by a truck. And then the credits come and we're like, wow, where's it going to go from here? Well, that's when they introduce pop star Sky Riley, again, played by Naomi Scott, who is apparently preparing for her comeback tour following a public struggle with substance abuse and a car crash that killed her actor boyfriend, Paul Hudson. But she needs painkillers as she's getting better to cover her injuries from the crash. And she goes to see Louis, who happens to be a friend of hers from high school, apparently, in order to get Vicodin. Sky then unfortunately witnesses Louis's death, inheriting the Smile entity. And this, again, spirals completely out of control from that point forward, but in a very unique way. I mean, a lot of the same elements from the original Smile, but done uniquely because of her position as a pop star. So here, I thought, really well done. And part of the reason I really like this is that it's a sequel that is as scary, as interesting to me, if not more, than the original movie. And I thought, wow, because the premise is incredibly simple, right? It's like The Ring with a smile, right? I mean, we've seen this before, but for them to make it this unique and interesting without having to spend any time explaining the backstory, which I'm sure we'll get at some point in Smile 10, but without doing that, I thought was really, really well done. And of course, I think Naomi Scott did a fantastic job there playing Sky Riley. So what do you think here about Smile 2?
Yeah, I agree. Like, I know you really like Smile.
Yeah,
and
the original.
Yeah,
and this one.
The original.
Right.
And I gotta say, like, when I saw Smile, the original, I thought, like, I say this a lot, it is so difficult to come up with a new concept of horror.
Right.
And you're right, like this is something similar to, and we said this, like The Ring, because
it's
it
like
takes a
infection
while,
horror, right? It
for the
passes on.
curse to kind of develop where the next person could get it and pass it on.
Right.
But like, to create a new way to do it is very rare.
Right.
I mean, there is a breakdown and a formula for most horror, movies.
Millions of tropes being used over and over again, of course.
But like, to come up with a new concept, I think is very difficult. And I think Smile did it really well. And I have to say, there's not a lot of sequels that you could say are good, but like Smile 2, they did a very good job following up the original.
Yeah.
And making it a little novel at the same time.
Totally agree. And that's exactly why I like it. So on the Scare-O-Meter here, I'm giving this a 7 out of 10. What would you give it on the Scare-O-Meter?
Again, there is like flashes of things that are scary. The premise in itself is a little scary. But I would give it like a 6.
Okay, you're always going to be slightly lower than I am.
Lower, yeah.
Just like a little bit.
But while we're watching movies, you're also like constantly jumping and yelping.
Because I'm paying attention.
I pay attention too, and I just like sit there and watch
it.
I'm like,
I have really good reflexes. What can I say? I have really good reflexes.
Yeah, you're just really good at screaming at people.
And I say there are some elements here, and I'm just not spoiling anything, but there's a sequence where she's being chased by her dance troupe in her apartment, and the dance troupe freezes at certain places in just really contorted ways. I thought, wow, that's just creepy, because
that was a really good scene.
I thought that was a fantastic scene. And very, very creepy. Okay, now number 3 of the 2024 is Speak No Evil, the U.S. remake. Critics love this, 84%. A little bit of background here is it is actually based on a 2022 Danish-Dutch movie of the same name. And the background is, the premise is very, very similar. although they kind of switch it up a little bit in terms of who the couples are. In the U.S. version, it is a American couple, Louise and Ben, who are vacationing in Italy, and their daughter, Agnes. And they meet and befriend a free-spirited British couple, Patty and Sierra, and their son, Ant. And when Louise and Ben get an invite to visit Patty at his remote home in Devon, Ben decides he needs to escape from his dreary life looking for a new job and convinces Louise that they need to take the opportunity for a family vacation. And of course, you might guess, Patty and his family are not what they seem. But even though you know that, you're just not ready for the depths that this gets into when they get there. And what's really fascinating to me, obviously, is that we had an opportunity to see this movie during Comic-Con several months before it was released, and also had a chance to participate in the question and answer session with James Watkins, the director, James McAvoy, who played Patty, and Mackenzie Davis, who plays Louise. And what was fascinating was James Watkins saying that although the original was fantastic, he knew that American audiences wouldn't like the way it ended. And having watched it, I totally agree. The way he decides to finish this in the third act is bonkers, but absolutely perfect for American audiences, me included. I absolutely loved it. I don't know if it was all that much horror, as more as horrifying and more of a thriller. But that being said, I think it's well worth the horror moniker and getting my number 3 place for 2024. What did you think here of Speak No Evil, the American version?
I agree. I thought it was a really good movie, and I enjoyed it more than I thought it would.
Right.
And I think it was because probably the actors involved and like the third act of the movie.
Yes.
Because we all turn, like when we watch movies, we tend to find that like in the end, everyone turns into superheroes.
Right. Which is not realistic.
It's not realistic.
Right.
Like, not everyone is trained as a Navy SEAL or a martial artist.
Right.
Or,
Right,
like,
of course.
That stuff just doesn't happen. And
Yeah.
the way that I think, when you fumble through things, trying to get things right, that is reality.
Yes.
Right. And especially when you're like terrified and you're running for your life.
Right.
You're not
going to be perfect.
Right. You're not going to be perfect.
Right.
You're going to try and
you're going to make a lot of mistakes.
And I think
you're going to run up instead of running out. You're going to do all those things that we hate.
But another weird thing is that like, you kind of like the villain for the most part in this movie.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. Because, they, in the beginning, you just see them as this, very free, easygoing couple.
Absolutely.
They're fun to be around.
And their mysterious mute son, of course.
Right. And you feel bad for them because you're like, oh, like how tragic. And,
yeah, sure.
And yet they still have this very positive attitude.
Yeah.
They're still like loving life. And you're like, well, I want to be that positive person, not let things get me down, go out there and still have adventure.
Right.
Where you see the American couple where they're just kind of more rigid. And,
right.
They're
incredibly unhappy. Yeah. They got a lot of things going on there. That,
and they can't be that
guy he made the family move. They lost his job. He doesn't want to move back. The wife is sacrificing her career in order to support him.
Her career.
Yes. And of course their daughter hates them or doesn't hate them, but they don't all get along. So there's obviously lots of issues here popping up. And I just love the dynamic there between them. And what I love about the US version is not only the third act where they change things, but also they give some meaning as to why Patty is doing it and not that he's just a psychopath, right?
Yes.
Because in the Danish version, they really don't. It's just like, these are just psychos.
Yeah.
So, I thought that was really, really well done. So as far as scare meter, though, I didn't find it super scary, very tense. I give it a scare meter of 4.
Yeah, I agree. It was tense, but not scary.
Mm-hmm.
But it was horror. I mean,
I agree.
You could call it a horror thriller because of the tension and you don't know where it's going.
Right.
And there are things that happen that you're like, oh my God, like get the hell out of there.
I agree.
But you want to be polite.
Yeah. And
which is like, come on, like.
Well, that's the moral of the story is that they're just over polite. But so scare meter 0 to 10. What do you give it?
I gave it like a 3.
A 3. Again, you're just gonna take 1 less than me.
3 or 4. I mean, like it's 3 or 4.
Okay.
I mean, somewhere around there. I mean,
right.
5 is kind of the middle of the road. If I give something a 6 or 7,
yes.
But like this one, it's a thriller. there are horrifying things that happen, but not like scary, horror scary.
Right. I agree. So there you go, guys. You have my top three, which of course is different than Joanne's top three. I have this number one, Late Night with the Devil, number two, Smile 2, and number three, Speak No Evil, the US remake, which I thought was fantastic. And as I mentioned earlier, my honorable mention is Oddity. So with that said, let's go ahead and hit the air horn. On to the next part. Let's move on to the dares. Let's move on to those dares, those NFL player props that we like to dare to make in Super Bowl 59, the Super Bowl that no one wants to see outside of Kansas City and Philadelphia.
Yes, I agree. It's so terrible.
Brutal. Absolutely brutal.
I honestly don't even care about the commercials. Like watching that, I really could not care less.
Yes.
To watch this thing.
But we can bet on it. We can certainly bet on it. And that's what we're here to help you with. So let's get our player props going for Super Bowl 59. Give us your first player prop, Joanne.
My first player prop is Saquon Barkley's rushing yards.
Okay.
So currently they have it at 117.5 rushing yards.
Okay.
And, I'm going to go with the under for Saquon Barkley.
Okay.
And I think this is interesting because this one is, when we say dare to make, this one is a dare to make kind of bet because Saquon Barkley has had the best season in his entire NFL career this year with the Eagles.
Yeah, no surprise.
I'm
the
not
Giants
kind of anything about the Giants and why that is.
You don't have to. They kind of sucked.
Like for the first time in his career, he's rushed over 2,000 yards.
Yeah. And
he's had 13 rushing touchdowns.
Right.
Like those two numbers he has never achieved with the Giants.
Right.
And granted, he was injured for several of the seasons while he's with the Giants, but even when he was healthy, he didn't have those numbers.
Yeah, that's true.
And so like in the postseason this year, like he's just been, unstoppable.
He has.
Averaging 147.3 rushing yards per game against the Packers, the Rams, and the Commanders in their postseason.
Yeah.
But let's see here. It is the Packers, the Rams, and the Commanders that we're talking about. And I've mentioned this in the regular season. Like Saquon Barkley had 255 rushing yards against the Rams.
Yeah, right.
In the postseason, he had 205. So the Rams did a slightly better job, try to stop Saquon Barkley.
Yes.
But now we're moving on to the Chiefs. And like, although the Chiefs, and I say it and everyone else says it, they got extremely lucky throughout the season and extremely lucky in the championship, in the, AFC championship game against the Bills.
Right.
But having that said, the Chiefs I don't know. Do they get lucky? Do they just play better? I don't know what's going on in the postseason. But like throughout the season, the Chiefs have had a pretty good run defense. They don't really allow, more like less. They usually allow less than 100 yards per game.
Well, and actually to tell you, during the regular season even, they allowed the 8th least rushing yards per game of any team in the NFL at 101.8. So this is not totally out of left field that they're good at run defense.
But they haven't gone against Saquon Barkley.
True.
So we don't know if Barkley has more pizzazz, better footwork.
Sure.
I don't know. Maybe he's distracting them with his dazzling gaze
and jumping over people backwards.
Yes,
like it's almost like a cheat code at this point.
A dog runs on the field, and Saquon Barkley takes advantage. We don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But having said all that, I just think that I'm going to go with the under.
Okay. Yeah.
That doesn't mean he's not going to have 116 yards, right?
Right, sure.
I just don't think that he's going to have 118.
Right. So you're going to take the under
for
Saquon Barkley's rushing yards, 170.5. Obviously, very daring because if you think about it, he's had 3 runs, 60-plus yards, touchdown runs. He breaks out and does it. But if he doesn't get that, then this is a very meaningful over-under because 117.5 sounds totally legitimate. You can go under if he doesn't break one of those really long runs. And you can bet that the Chiefs and Steve Spagnuolo's defense will game plan around shutting down Saquon Barkley. I like that bet as well. So Saquon Barkley under the rushing yards, 117.5. So my first player prop is on the other side of the ball, and that's Patrick Mahomes. His passing yards prop is 256.5 passing yards. I'm going to take the under on 256.5 passing yards for Patrick Mahomes, and I'll tell you why. So in 2 playoff games so far, Patrick Mahomes threw for 177 against the Texans and 245 against the Bills. Both of those, spoiler alert, under 256.5 passing yards. And they found ways to win, but not with Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball. During the regular season, he only averaged 245.5 passing yards per game, which is his lowest per game average of his 8-year career.
Yeah.
And again, spoiler alert, 245.5 is less than 256.5. All the numbers pointing in that direction.
And I gotta say, like, this has not been Patrick Mahomes' best year.
No, not in terms of his production.
Right,
I mean,
his
in terms
production.
of results, yeah, but not in terms of his production on the field.
But just because you win doesn't mean you played a good game. It
Right.
just means you got lucky, or you played a team worse than you, or you had the refs just kind of on your side.
Right.
Whichever one.
All those things could definitely impact it, but he's certainly not doing it by throwing the ball. That's certainly not. I mean, he's doing enough to win, but he's not doing it by just knocking the lights out here. And keep in mind, the Eagles on the other side, they've allowed only 174.2 passing yards per game this season. It's the least allowed passing yards per game of any team in the NFL. So yeah, like I said, the Chiefs have found ways to win this season. In fact, they've won 12 games this season by just 1 score or less, but it hasn't necessarily been through the air with Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball. I'm banking on Mahomes being more conservative and being a more conservative passer like he has been all season long, combined with the fact that the Eagles have an exceptional secondary, including Cooper DeJean, to push Mahomes under the 256.5 passing yards in the Super Bowl. So I am taking the under on Patrick Mahomes' 256.5 passing yards as my first player prop. All right, let's give you your second player prop for Super Bowl 59.
So my second player prop, also Patrick Mahomes, but
Okay.
it's his rushing yards.
Right.
So Mahomes, everyone says goes into another gear during, the postseason.
He certainly does seem that way.
And one of the things people do notice is that he rushes more during the postseason than he does during the regular season.
Right.
And right now the under over is 28.5 rushing yards.
Yep.
And I'm gonna go with the over for that.
Yep.
So the last 2 Super Bowls, Mahomes has rushed for 44 yards.
Right.
Last year he rushed for 66 yards against the 49ers.
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk about how he can't do it in the air, he's gonna have to figure a way how to, trying to beat the Eagles, and he will more than likely probably use his legs like he did, during the AFC Championship game with against the Bills.
Right.
Even during that game, he rushed for 43 yards, 11 carries, 2 touchdowns. So when push comes to shove, he can run. And I think if he doesn't have the opportunity in the air, which he probably won't,
Right.
because also, he hasn't been that great, like I said, this year in the passing game as previous years. He's probably going to use his legs more. He might need to. So I think that this is not so much of a dare pick, but probably a pretty solid, pick. It's not that much of.
It's such a low number.
Yeah,
It's such a low number.
It's so low. I was very surprised when I saw it.
I feel like
what?
It seems like a good play just because it's such a low number, such a low bar for him to hit.
I honestly thought that it would be closer to like 40, like 38, 39.
Yeah.
The fact that it was like 28.5, I was really surprised.
Yeah, and keep in mind, the Eagles defense plays very often 2 high safety looks designed to kind of limit explosive plays. That gives him room to run. So he sees his passing options break down, be covered. And like I said, what the best pass defense probably in the NFL right now are the Philadelphia Eagles. He's going to take off, and it only takes a couple scrambles. And we saw him do this in the conference championship as well. Yeah. 10 yards at a time. It's only a couple of those, and he's already hit that.
Not even 10 yards. You go 6, 1, all those adds up.
Right.
If you're carrying the ball 11 times, it adds up.
Right. And that's not even taking it in consideration occasional 4th and 1 or 4th and 2,
Right,
where he might sneak the
exactly.
ball for 1 or 2 yards,
Which he does,
or 3 yards,
yeah.
or 4 yards at a time. So Patrick Mahomes taking the over on 28.5 rushing yards. I like that one a lot. All right. My last player prop for Super Bowl 59 is back over to the Eagles, and that is Dallas Goedert, the tight end there. His current player prop for receptions is 4.5 receptions. I like the over on 4.5 receptions for Dallas Goedert in Super Bowl 59. So in 3 playoff games so far with the Eagles, the Goedert has averaged 5 receptions on 6 targets. He's averaged 4.2 receptions on 5.2 targets per game during the regular season, and that's already a good amount for him, but they've been relying on him even more in the postseason. Like I said, up to 5 receptions on 6 targets. The Chiefs have allowed the 6th most total production to opposing tight ends in terms of a combination of receptions, yards, and TDs. And in fact, they've allowed 6.2 receptions per game to opposing tight ends this season. So spoiler alert, again, 6.2 more than 4.5. And the way that the Eagles are focusing on getting the ball to Goddard has only grown from the end of the year into the postseason since he came back from injury. And I think the Eagles will, of course, focus their offense, as they usually do, through Saquon Barkley. But Jalen Hurts is going to need to pass occasionally to soften up, like we said, the Chiefs' top 8 run defense. And what better way to do that than dumping the ball off to Dallas Goedert and say, hey, get some yard after the catch, and he will pick up 5, 6, 7 yards at a time. It doesn't even matter if he gets stopped right away because we're only betting on the receptions. I think he'll easily go over 4.5 receptions in Super Bowl 59. So I love that player prop. Again, Dallas Goedert, tight end for the Philadelphia Eagles, over 4.5 receptions. And that brings us to the end of the show. And on the show there. So another great scares and dares. Joanne, why don't you give us your social media so people can follow you?
It's at Kung Fu for You on X.
All right. And
my Twitter.
Twitter. And on Blue Sky.
And on Blue Sky.
And on Blue Sky. I think it's also Kung Fu for You there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, and wasting time with us. Until next time, watch those horror movie scares, make those NFL player prop dares, and enjoy Super Bowl 59.
Good luck, everyone.